Hello. Today I want to just briefly run through two times when you may need to sell your house where it's not necessarily a happy thing to do. Obviously, normally, most people's case, you put the house on the market because you're looking at upsizing or downsizing or moving to a different area for work or schools. But either way, it's a choice, something you decide to do. You may just fancy a change. So you put your house on the market, you sell your house, you buy another property. The reasons for doing that are all fairly cut and dry. There are other occasions, however. There are occasions where you may have to get involved in the sale of a property of a loved one or a friend who has lost the capacity to be able to sell that property themselves. It may be that they need to go into residential care and the property needs to be sold for that reason. It may also be that somebody unfortunately passes away and then the property and all the assets have to be disposed of, and they have to be disposed of in a very legal way. So there's processes behind that. Not everybody is necessarily always aware. They think that power of attorney, for instance, is something you can do when a loved one loses the ability to act for themselves. But unfortunately, that's not the case. A power of attorney has to be put in place before they reach that stage. But there are other options that are available to you, and I'll just briefly run through those. Also, at the end of this video, I'll also put a little checklist of what I've said and some of the bits and pieces that are important. So I've been through this personally rather than just as an estate agent, although I have done it as an estate agent for 20 years. But my mother lost capacity a number of years ago, and we had to look at what we would do, bearing in mind we hadn't got a lasting power of attorney in place. And then further on than that, she did unfortunately pass away, so we had to look at the probate side of it. They are two very different. So just run through power of attorney first. Power of attorney is something that if you're going to appoint, you need to appoint somebody as your lasting power of attorney before you're in a position where you can no longer be judged to make those decisions yourself. So before you need it, really. And very few people are going to do that. I wouldn't think to do that before anything happens to me, but that's something you need to do. If you have done that and you do get into that position, there are two forms of power of attorney. There's one to do with health and care. So that gives the power of attorney the authorization to make decisions regarding your care, your health, treatment, that sort of thing. And then there's the financial decisions power of attorney, which gives them decisions on where your money is, how it can be spent on your behalf, your property and other assets. Again, only if it's deemed that you're not able to make those decisions yourself. As I say, most people don't do that. So if you don't, and or your loved one hasn't, and you've suddenly got to a point, as I did, where you realise that there's a problem, and that when your loved one is diagnosed, in my case it was my mother, as having Alzheimer's, they are instantly, once they're diagnosed, deemed to not be able to make those sort of financial decisions themselves. So we had to apply to the Court of Protection to become a deputy. It's all very long-winded and mouthful words, but you need to be applied to be a deputy to the Court of Protection. Now that can be straightforward. There's lots of paperwork to do, there's costs involved, and in most cases, in my experience, the loved one, whether it be the son, whether it be the daughter, whether it would be whoever it would be, usually does get granted to become a deputy to the Court of Protection. It can happen that that isn't the case, because if the court decides that or thinks that you're not responsible, they can appoint someone of their own choosing. They can appoint the court themselves, or they can appoint somebody else. So it's not always a decision that you or your loved one would have wanted. But 9 times out of 10, if you're a responsible person, you apply to become a deputy of the Court of Protection, and that then gives you the legal right to act on that loved one's behalf when it comes to disposing of assets, house, and that sort of thing. Very important, you have to work in their favour. So you have to do everything in the best interests of the person that you're acting for, and the court will look into that and will check that. So you can't get away with anything shady on that, and neither should you. So you apply to the Court of Protection to become a deputy, you act on their behalf, and then you can put your house on the market with an estate agent. The estate agent needs to know why it's going on the market and that you've done that, because the process of selling your house can take a little bit longer. because there's a lot more paperwork involved, there's a lot more checks involved, so the whole process can take a little bit longer. I would normally say, from my experience, you add on about 4 weeks to the standard time it might take to get it through. The other way of selling, or reason for selling a house, is the most unfortunate one, and that's probate. So again, with probate, if a husband passes away, but the house is in joint names between him and his wife, then the wife will automatically inherit the property, unless there is a will in place saying something different. But under normal circumstances, the second party will automatically inherit the property. So that's nothing to worry about. If the person lives on their own, if they're the last surviving, and when they pass away, everybody who's listed as owning that property has passed away, then you will have to apply for probate. You have to apply for probate to be able to deal with all of their assets. So that's the money they've got in the bank, that's any investments that they may have, it's their property, and it's all other assets, everything that's in the house, everything that they owned, everything that they've got. And you have to apply for that, and you apply for a grant of probate, and you become the executor of the grant of probate. You can apply for more than one executor. So if there's 2 brothers, 2 sisters, brother and sister, and you both want to jointly be involved in making those decisions, then you can apply for it jointly. The cost is more, so in each one it's a little bit of cost. I'm not going to quote costs because they can change quite rapidly, and then all of a sudden this video is out of date, or Paul said it was this and actually it's something else. Checking today, it's roughly, I think, about £120 to apply for it. So there are probate fees. You also have to think about inheritance tax, depending on how much the property and all of the assets included are worth. And probate itself can take about 12 to 14 weeks on average. Again, that can change. It can be a bit quicker, it can be a bit longer. You need to bear that in mind when you come to want to sell the property. And this is a forced sale. This is something you don't want to do. It's something you don't want to necessarily get involved in. It could be the family home. It could have been where you were born and grew up. But at some point, something needs to happen with it. You do need to do that. A lot of people think that you need to wait until probate is granted before you put the house on the market. And I hear that a lot. People say, well, I can't market it yet because we applied for probate 5 weeks ago and we haven't got it yet. Actually, that's not the case. I wouldn't put your house on the market until you've at least applied for probate. But bearing in mind how long it takes, I would be looking at putting the house on the market before probate is physically granted. There shouldn't be, in most cases, any reason why probate won't be granted. You just got to apply. So I would suggest you look at putting your house on the market once you've applied for probate. You can market it, it can be advertised, there can be a board, estate agent can conduct viewings, you can accept offers, you can start the whole legal process with the solicitors. All you can't do is exchange contracts and complete, which is the very end of the process, obviously, until you've got probate. So as long as your estate agent is aware that it's a probate sale, and as long as the prospective buyers are aware, so that everyone is aware it's going to take a bit longer, you can put it on the market before probate is granted, and don't worry about doing that. The value of the whole estate needs to be reported to the Inland Revenue, but if you do the probate, then obviously you'll go through that situation. A lot of people also go to a solicitor to do that, with all the costs involved in doing so. Personal experience, you can do it yourself. Quite a long-winded form. It's downloadable. You fill it in online, send it off. But if you've got access to all the information you need, as in what everything's worth, then you can do that yourself. With respect to what it's worth, you will need to get some valuations on the property so that you've got an official valuation letter from an estate agent that you can send off with it to verify what you said the property's worth. And you can't say it's worth any less than it really is, or you've got to be quite tight with that. The only other thing I would say to you when you come to do this is that dealing with a client and a customer and conducting a sale for somebody who's really up for doing it, because they want this extra bedroom, or they want the bigger garden, or they want some field views, and that's the reasons for doing all the things they're doing, is not easy, but it's straightforward. When you're dealing with a client with regards to a forced sale like this, it's not as straightforward. The client doesn't always, and if you are the client, you don't always want to be talking about your mother's house or your father's house if they've not long passed away. So I think it's very important to put you probably on the market with an estate agent who has dealt with this sort of thing before. Now clearly I'm going to say I have. But if you're watching this out of my area, whoever you're going to be dealing with, because there are emotions involved in this, not just happy emotions. So what you don't need is an estate agent who's going to be chasing you to put the house on the market every 24 hours, because that's what his manager has told him to do. You want somebody who's aware of how long this process might take, and that when you sent the letter off to say how much the house is worth, then in the intervening period there may be a funeral. There's a period of mourning. You might not want to necessarily be talking about it straight away. So keeping in contact on a lower range basis via the occasional email is fine, but I wouldn't be ringing people every 5 minutes to try and see if they've made a decision to put the house on the market yet, because it's not something they're necessarily wanting to do straight away. But bear that in mind if you are the vendor, or you're the potential vendor, as to who you're going to choose as your estate agent. Because you need to know that they know what they're doing, and don't be afraid to ask them questions. How many probate sales have you sold before? How long have they been taking? What do you tell a client when they're looking at the property? What do you explain to them? And don't be afraid to tell them what you don't want them to know. So if you don't want them to mention that the individual in the house has died, you don't necessarily have to do that. So they could be into care, and I've done that myself and said, look, people have gone into residential care when I know that they did, but they've now passed away, because not everybody is as comfortable with that. So it's quite important to be happy and comfortable as the client with who it is you're dealing with. And in my case, I think that because I'm a bit older and I've dealt with it and been on your side of this and done it for my own parents as well, it's quite important that you've got somebody who can relate and be empathetic about the whole process. So the reason I've done this video is just to explain a little bit about it, because people watching this might be in the position where somebody's just passed away, or they might be in a position where they think this is going to happen in the next few months or few years, and they've got elderly parents and they might want a bit of advice on it. So this is not a video to say you put your house on the market with me. This is basically saying that I've done this for quite a number of years. I know how the process works, and if you need any help or advice other than putting your house on the market with it, please don't hesitate to contact me. That's what I'm here for. I'm a personal estate agent. It's not all about the selling of the property until you put it on the market with me, of course. But before that, it's all about all the advice and help I can give, which you might not necessarily get from your standard high street estate agent. So, any questions, just send me a private message, send me an email, give me a call, and I'll do my very, very best to answer them for you. Thank you for watching.